Hello, this is David Lowry with Club Fantasci, and today we are talking with Sam Flegal, who is an artist and has done all kinds of games for Fantasty Flight, AEG, and many other systems. So we're going to talk a little bit about his process, how he got into the business, and some tips and tricks for other artists who are trying to get there as well. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your history and what made you decide to become an artist.
Okay. Well, I mean, as far as becoming an artist, it actually goes back to the ripe old age of 3 is when I started drawing, and it all started. I don't remember where we were flying to, but I was with my family flying across country. It was a long flight, and my dad could not get me to chill out, and so he taught me to draw Batman and Robin. And so I started off tracing my dad's drawings is how I got my start. And I guess the way my dad tells the story is by the time I was about 5 or 6, I no longer asked my dad to draw anything because I was better than him. And so that stayed true. And my interest in comics also stayed through reading comics, copying pages from the comics and trying to make it look as cool, all that kind of stuff. And then I got into games when I was in middle school and just immediately fell in love with the art. Just it's so inspiring, so much cool stuff. And then, like so many of us, you turn 18 and suddenly everybody thinks you should know what you're supposed to do with the rest of your life. And I knew I liked art. It seemed like a good fit. So I went to Mississippi State University down in Starkville, Mississippi, and I majored in art. But I specifically was majoring in animation. I thought, like Toy Story had just kind of come out. I thought, oh man, I'm going to make the next Toy Story. And Mississippi State had just put in like a $10 million computer lab and all towards their animation department. Right. So that's how I ended up there. And I took my first animation class after being in school for 2 or 3 years, and I hated it. It was the worst. I don't know how much you know about animation, but it's a lot more like computer programming than it is like drawing.
Right.
And so I'm in there punching in code and thinking, I have made a very bad choice. So the animation degree is very similar to the graphic design degree, so I just went ahead and finished with graphic design. And the graphic design program at Mississippi State, I will say, is actually really good. The folks that run it actually have worked in marketing departments, and so I was very well prepped to go out into the world. And so I got my degree. I went and got a job as a graphic designer. I worked in a couple different marketing departments, and I hated it, is really what it comes down to. I did that for about 7 or 8 years. And after I was about 4 years into it, my wife approached me and said that, Sam, you're miserable and you got to figure out what makes you happy. And so that was one of those kind of wake up moments. I started thinking about how I had gotten down that path, because basically from 18 to 23 or 24, it almost had just been autopilot, really.
Right.
It was like, I guess I'll do this. And then you end up doing it and sort of realize it wasn't what you thought it was. So I started going back to what did I love as a kid, and it was comics and games, and it was drawing. And so I just started drawing, and the first thing I did is I started a club called Creative Club, where I got some of my writer buddies to come over and some other artist friends, and we would just draw and base stuff off of their stories, and they would base stories off of our art. And so that I didn't just quit my day job, because that's not a great idea either.
Right.
But I developed an environment that encouraged me to draw more. And then through the games and other nerdy stuff, I knew about conventions. So I put together a little portfolio in, this is about 2008 now, and I went to Dragon Con in Atlanta. I don't know if you're familiar with Dragon Con, but it's a big one. And I just took my book around to all the artists. If I liked their art, I'd take my book to them, get the critique. I'd try and buy a print or something that I liked as kind of a thank you for their time. And then I took all that feedback to heart, and I went home and I just, anything they said, like, this is wrong, like okay, why is it wrong? And I try and research it and understand the critique. And at first, I really regretted my time in marketing, but one of the things I did benefit from that I didn't realize is in marketing, you design a logo or a book or something, you put all the pages up on a wall, and an art director comes by and is just like, nope, 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 and they just cut up all your stuff.
Right.
And so I got a very thick skin because of that, because you can't become attached to all your logos like they're your children or something. So when I got these critiques on my art, I didn't get bent out of shape. I took it as honest feedback and really took it to heart. And so then I'd come back the next year and show my stuff again, and started showing it to art directors and get more feedback. And the other thing I'd get is, wow, you've really improved a lot over this last year. I should also say, when I first started drawing, after I had not done it for about 5 years, it actually felt like someone broke my hand. It didn't work. It's not like riding a bicycle where it just comes back. It took me about 6 months to get to the level of drawing when I left school,
right.
to get that back. So, but just keeping at it and making it a priority. Then I'd come back, a year later at these conventions, and people started to take notice of me. And where my career really took off, as far as from there, is I had done a painting for a small gaming company, and an art director from Fantasty Flight saw it when I was at Gen Con. I was displaying my art at Gen Con,
right.
and she gave me my first job, and I've really been working in games ever since.
That's awesome. So is getting over the uncomfortable hump of your own artwork, keeping consistent with practicing your craft, taking the feedback and actually applying it to your craft, and then most importantly, getting in front of art directors of other companies that allowed you to start doing this full time.
Yeah, that's it. That's a big part of it. And the fundamentals are so important. You really do. So now I'm on the other side where I'm setting up at conventions, these game conventions, and I have people come and bring their portfolio to me, and it's surprising how many people get offended or can't take that feedback. I don't know. I guess people feel, either precious about their art, or I don't know. Art's a weird thing, because you do have to put your heart and your soul into it when you're making the object.
Right.
And if that doesn't come through, then people don't relate to it. But at the same time, once you're done, you kind of have to sever all those emotional ties and accept that it's a physical object that exists outside of you as a person. When someone critiques your art, they're not critiquing you for who you are.
Right.
Yet on some level, you've put your soul into it. So there is that feeling.
It does feel like a personal attack.
It does. It can.
Yeah.
And you have to overcome that in order to improve. Particularly if you've approached someone and say, hey, I'd like you to critique my art. I think a lot of times what people want is actually just to have a professional tell them that they're good.
Right.
And when that doesn't happen, they get very disappointed and sometimes defensive, and
right.
that doesn't work out for anyone usually. Though.
So what's a tip or trick or two you can share with the other artists out there about taking that feedback or that criticism and making it your own so it doesn't offend you?
Yeah, man, I'm trying to think through, because that's a process that I internalized while working in marketing. And I guess the simple thing is to, when you're getting a critique, try to talk as little as possible, because there's this desire to defend. Like someone says, oh, the hand is wrong in that. Well, let me tell you why. Instead, just say, okay, I understand what you're saying. Maybe keep a little notebook with you and jot down notes of what each person is telling you. And one thing that I took to heart as I got over the hump of just drawing and painting well, I would start to get more elaborate feedback. And so what I would do is, if I showed my portfolio to, say, 5 different people, either artists or art director, and I was getting the same feedback from the majority of those people, then you can say, oh, well, that's definitely a problem. It wasn't just one person's opinion. Right. You have 4 or 5 opinions from different sources that are saying the same thing is wrong with this piece. Where it gets tough is you'd also get in situations where you have 5 different people review it and give you 5 different opinions. Right. And that's actually a good sign as well, because then your art is becoming more personal, and you have to make those judgment calls about the direction you want your art to go in. It's no longer as simple as that hand is wrong, or the anatomy is incorrect, or the lighting's very bad. And so you want to show it to enough people to get different feedback, I'd say.
Earlier, before we started this interview, you and I were talking, and you had made the comment that you actually have to turn down work now because there isn't enough time in the day to do all this painting and all this stuff. And so, as a professional myself, knowing all the projects I have going on all the time, one of the things that most people struggle with is time management and knowing how to get through every
Sure.
step of everything that has to be done. what are the things that you can share with them about, this is how much time you should dedicate to a day, or how do you block your calendar out, or what do you do to make it so you can actually get your work done on time?
Sure. So the other side of my growth as an artist is my daughter was born right around the same time. And so my schedule is often dictated by when she goes to school and those sorts of things. So that's a big part. And in a way, you'd think having a kid would be less motivating, but it forces you into a regimented schedule. So suddenly, like she's at daycare at these times. So I have 6 hours. So, you may only have 5 or 6 hours to get something done. And so you have to compartmentalize into those sorts of time availability. I often envy the younger artists right out of school who don't have family commitments and all that stuff yet, because they could just do so much.
Right.
But tricks are, I try to not check my email first thing. I find that starting off your day with your email could end up in just ruining the time you've set aside to paint. Because so often you check your email, there's something like, oh man, I have to respond to this right away. And you end up an hour or two into Facebook and the internet and email, and then suddenly realize, oh man, it's only an hour for lunch. Now I only have an hour to paint.
Right.
I didn't. So save the email till either like lunchtime, you're going to check your email while you're eating, or at the end of a painting session. I find stopping painting, right around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then you still have a couple hours left in your day to handle the internet stuff. And I do want to jump in there. One of the other sides of importance is not just having time to paint, but if you don't market yourself and put your stuff out there, no one's going to see what you painted. So It is important to post to Facebook and social media and Instagram, and all that stuff is such a big part of it. But what I've found is I can prep all that stuff in that last 2 hours of the day, stuff that might go out the next day or in 2 days. Like if you're going to write a blog post about an art technique or an event you were at, you can write it a couple days beforehand, and then you can still publish it in the morning. Because I have found it is important to publish to social media in the morning. There's certain times of the day people engage more with that stuff, and you want to be in the right places at the right time.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you have to commit more than 5 or 10 minutes at those times of day. You can finish those things later. The other thing for me that I've found is very important, and it sounds so simple, but it's just get a decent night's sleep. So often for something about artists, we find ourselves working at midnight and 2 and 3 in the morning, and oh man, I've got this crazy deadline and I have to get it done. And I've been there. I hope to not end up there again. That's partly why I decline jobs. There's this, when you first get work in any field, in the arts, every job that comes along, like, yes, I want it, and you just take on so much stuff that suddenly you realize you have no time to relax, no time to socialize or spend time with your family, and sleep is the thing that seems easiest to get rid of.
Right.
And that's a very dangerous road to go down. So yeah, a good night's sleep and a structured day. I do work on the weekends, but I try not to. I try to stick to the 5-hour week. I like to work 40 or 50 hours a week, and I try to treat it like you would a normal job if you were working, for a corporation or for a company.
Right.
Sticking to that kind of a thing. But invariably, when you work for yourself, you end up, I'll just take care of this now and that. But I try to do that as little as possible.
So, having worked in this business for so long, one of the things I know with most artists of any genre is they don't know how to value their work, and they tend to do a lot of stuff and give it away for free or horribly discounted or whatever. You told me earlier that this piece was about $1,800. How does an artist figure out how to value their work and then stand by their price?
I got a great tip from an artist and a mentor of mine. He's also a good friend, Dan DeSantos, and you should definitely check out his work if you haven't. He does tons of book covers. And he said the toughest piece to sell when you're selling original art specifically is the first one. But once you sell that first painting, the next painting you create, raise your price by 10%, just 10%. So if you sold the first one, for $500, the next one will be $550. And then after that, you're going to sell one for just over $600. And before you know it, as you create more and more pieces, your work sells for more and more. And so, yeah, I mean, I've sold this painting for $1,800, but it's definitely not the first painting I sold. I had to work to that price because there is a danger of selling your work for too much on the front end.
Right.
So you want to grow the market so that collectors see, oh, his work is growing in price. I mean, that's an important part of that market.
It's implied value.
The other thing I've heard people say, to figure out how many hours something took you and use that to value. But as I've been an artist now, I guess about 5 years, I found the opposite's actually true, because as I've gotten better as a painter, I paint faster,
right.
Yet my work also looks better. So I actually spent more time on a painting when I was first starting out and it didn't look as good than I do now. So if I only valued it based on time, it would actually be an inverse relationship, so you can't quite do that. But a good way to start is to figure out, how many hours did something take you? If I was making better than minimum wage, about kind of what price that would be. But the just talking about the price of the original sale is not actually the complete picture. So taking this image, this piece is called Liberty or Death, and I did it for a convention in Chattanooga called LibertyCon that had me as the artist guest of honor this year, and it was a great experience. But through doing the piece for them, I managed to sell both the original sketch that I did for the piece and the original painting, so that's a part of the sales. To date, I've sold a number of prints, probably, it's only been around since February, so it's a relatively new piece, and I think I've sold so far somewhere around 60 to 80 prints as well, and those are of various sizes and amounts, ranging from $20 prints to like $80 large format, really nice G-clay prints, that kind of thing. So that's another factor. And then something else to consider is, in this case, the convention paid me to be there that weekend. So this was a part of our negotiation for doing it, was that they'd get this piece of art to put on the badges and the programs and the T-shirts and help their marketing. But I was paid to be there, so it wasn't free time. So when you start looking at all the different factors, I mean, it's very standard. Like if we're talking gaming specifically, you're paid for the commission to make the art. You then, if you've made an original painting, you can sell the original drawing and the original painting that you made. Fans are going to come and have you sign the books and the cards if you go to events, and then you're going to be able to sell, I sell dice bags that have my art on it, I sell play mats for card games that have my art on it, I sell prints, I do sketches for fans when they come by, and so all those things become a part of that price, and you start to realize pretty quickly that it doesn't equate to time as a simple ratio. What I would say, the best thing if you're trying to price an original is really evaluate the quality of your work and understand, where do I fit in the business, and then go to a convention and look at other paintings that people are doing and see, okay, this guy's selling his painting and it's a similar size and subject matter for that much. This other guy's selling it for this much. Someone else is going, yeah, I don't want to see that again for a while. And then you've moved on to other things, and really that's a really good sign, because what that means is over the last year you grew as an artist, which, anyone who's doing anything that's a merit-based career, you should get better at it as you move forward. Your craft improves, your technique improves, and so that's a good sign. So for me, I'd actually much rather sell it to someone who's a fan, who's just going to love it way more than I ever could and appreciate it for what it is. I kind of consider it like looking for good homes for all my children, making sure that they're cared for is one way. Now that said, I do have a couple pieces that take on personal meaning to me beyond the painting itself. It has to do with the reason I was inspired to make the painting, or something that happened to me while I was making the painting. And so I do have 2 or 3 pieces that I've set aside that are not for sale. So every once in a while I do. But most of the stuff I do for game companies, I'm happy to sell it, because when someone asks you to paint a guy fighting a dragon, for me, I love that stuff, but it doesn't come from a strong emotional place, because usually the game company has a look that I have to adhere to. It's commercial art. So I'm much less attached to that sort of thing. And honestly, it's really exciting to see the fans' reaction to the painting, and then they fall in love with it and they want to make it a part of their collection because they're the collectors of the game and they interact with that game world so much more, intensely than I do.
Right.
So yeah, I'd much rather have them enjoy it and make it a part of their collection.
What are some of the major game projects that you've worked on?
I guess so. For me, the biggest named stuff I've worked on is for Fantasty Flight Games. I've worked both on Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40K. And then for AEG, I've worked on Legend of the Five Rings. I've also worked on a number of role-playing game book projects. Most of the bigger name stuff for Hero Games. I did their Fantasy Hero Complete cover and also the cover for a pretty popular book series that was turned into a role-playing game called Monster Hunter International. And I did the Employee Handbook and role-playing game is what that was called. So it was a fun game. It's basically ex-Marines shoot vampires in the face is kind of the genre there. So it was fun.
So from an artist standpoint, when you're dealing with these companies and they're hiring you for work, what are the things that the artist needs to be aware of and careful of when operating to work for another company?
So the main thing that comes with game companies, particularly as we're now in this world of intellectual properties are, such a big thing. Everybody's looking for their own IP. Is most of the contracts are work for hire. And what that means is you have the painting, you can sell the painting if you make one. Usually the contract allows prints to be made and some small amount of merchandise that ranges. For example, Warhammer 40K, I can't do prints or merchandise or anything. But for Legend of the Five Rings, I'm actually, I can do prints, playmats, t-shirts, merchandise, whatever I want to sell, as long as I'm the one selling it, as the artist. So the contracts vary, but you have to be careful. If you take on too much work for hire, then 5 years down the line, you're still not going to own any of your work. And that's one thing that I didn't expect coming into this business, is that there is a strong secondary market for the use of your images. And so you kind of get to this point where you have to decide. Sometimes, doing something just for you can be far more financially advantageous than doing something for the wrong game company.
Right.
And so that's an important factor to consider. The other is you kind of have to know the games that you're working on. One of the reasons why I work on 40K is I played that game. I have 3,000 points of Nurgle Chaos Marines,
right.
and I painted them all myself and converted the figurines, and I loved playing that game. And so for me, when I get the card descriptions, I know what I'm doing. I know what that is. And in fact, when I first started working on the game, I was told that they would make a lot of changes. And to date, I've had very minor changes. Most of my work, I turn it in, and they're like, "Oh, that's perfect," and that's it. Whereas I've heard other artists talk about struggling quite a lot with that company because they don't quite understand the look or the feel. Right. I've also found being a fan of the games helps you a lot when interacting with the fans, because they want to come up and talk about, like with Legend of the Five Rings, there's all these different clans that
right.
the players take on the role of, and your clan some clans are devious, some clans are honorable, and so the choice that the players make impact the game and their own style choice. And so when I understand what they're talking about and can interact with them, let them know that I've played the game a little bit and I can get into the world as much as they get into the world, it matters a lot. In fact, I will say for sure, I've sold original paintings to fans specifically because we were able to talk and have a beer and enjoy
right.
the game and all that kind of stuff. So that'd be another factor. Is a lot of people may think like, I'm going to get into games because that's where the money is at. And that's not a good way to go, because the money's only there if you yourself can interact with that world of the fans and the collectors.
So
and all that.
that's a good point. We were talking earlier about Gen Con, and I think you and I both know there's people who know how to work a booth and a lot of people, most people that don't know how to work a booth.
That's true.
When you're working a booth at Gen Con or any other convention, what are some of the things that people need to really be aware of?
The number one thing I see that and I can speak to artists, I guess, more than I can the bigger companies, But I imagine it's true, whether you're selling shoes or art or games, there's certain things that just apply to sales, period.
Right.
And the first is smile and look like you're happy to be there.
Right.
When you're sitting at the table and you're distracted, you're either, you're eating a sandwich or you're drawing or you're not saying hi to people as they go by, people are going to think, oh, like that guy doesn't want me to walk over there. And so they won't. There's so much in our psyche where when something looks like a hostile or difficult situation, human nature says, I should avoid that.
Right.
And so if you're not tapping into the human experience of interacting with other people, then you're making your job infinitely harder. So really, like just as simple as stand up, dress presentable. I mean, I think artists can get away with a lot more in terms of, you don't have to wear a suit and tie,
right.
But just express
Look
yourself,
clean.
look clean. Another tip for artists that I give a lot, which is not standard, especially for men, is make sure your nails are clean because you end up pointing at your art and people interact with your hands
right.
a little bit more at the booth. But yeah, just, cleanliness, good presentation, smile, act like you want to be there goes a long way. Now, beyond that, I mean, I can get into some like nitty gritty stuff with sales in terms of how to talk to people, but a lot of that is also covered in get a good sales book. Even like Zig Ziglar stuff from the 80s,
right.
some of his tape series,
yeah.
It still applies today, particularly like, sure, he didn't understand internet sales because that didn't exist, but when it comes to selling in person, technology changes, people don't change.
Right.
So
exactly. So we're going to go over a few of your pieces here and whatever, and you can kind of describe what they are, where it came from, and a little bit of the history behind the piece. First, we got a set of cards. It looks like it's from L5R.
Yeah, that's a few of the cards. I've done now, I just checked, I've done 27 cards for the Legend of the Five Rings now, over the last 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
This little one down here, that was actually my first card down there.
27 cards.
27 cards so far.
So, do you find there's unrealistic expectations when people get into a deck building game like that, where they think they're going to get a lot more art, but they don't realize how much it really takes to get it done?
It really just depends on how much you want to do. With Legend of the Five Rings, I choose to take less cards because I'd rather produce a really great painting. Because again, I'm looking at the secondary uses beyond the card art. I have taken as many as 3 or 4 cards in a set, and that means in like a 1 to 2 month period, I'm just focused on doing those 4 cards, and it ends up eating a lot of my time, both personal and professional. And so for me, I look at it like, I want to take 1 card and make it great rather than take a lot and really struggle with it.
Okay, and here we have a cover for Fantasy Hero Complete. What is this game? And how did this come about?
Fantasy Hero, or the Hero system's been around for about 20 years, and just last year they did a Kickstarter to collect all the fantasy supplements in one big book, and the Kickstarter did really well, and so they had contacted me to do the cover. And it was a fun project, a little bit challenging because Fantasy Hero likes all the people on their covers to be smiling, so even the dragon actually is smiling. And so I had to come up with kind of how that would work. So my idea is that the dragon's actually trying to win over the hero there and convince her that he knows where better treasure is, and maybe they could just take some of his stuff and let him live. So,
Okay. So here's another print. It looks like it's from Legend of the Five Rings again.
Mm-hmm. That was a really great project. So I've kind of become the undead zombie monster guy for Legend of the Five Rings.
Okay.
I've done a few undead characters for them, and so for this one, the card description was very simple. It was just they wanted a skeletal samurai on a skeletal horse, and he needed to be in white armor. But beyond that, it was totally up to me what I wanted to do. So I really got into the story of the guy and kind of why he came about. And so the story behind this one is he's a member of the Unicorn Clan. That's why he wears white armor. And after battle, he was resurrected by a necromancer who pinned these scrolls to his chest. And I actually researched, at the top is the Japanese kanji for death that I included in there. I love the little details. And so he resurrected, but the Unicorn Clan are actually good guys in the story, and so a little bit of that was still left in him, and he was so angry from being brought back from the dead that he ripped the hands off of the necromancer who resurrected him. And so now he goes around collecting hands from various wizards, and so that's why he's got all these little hands decorating his armor and his horse. That's sort of his trophies. So he's kind of an anti-hero, I guess, in that sense. So
wow.
It's
That's
fun.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I find that if you can get into the story of a piece, that's what the fans relate to. Everybody wants to hear a good tale.
Right.
And if you can do that with your imagery, people get excited about that kind of stuff.
What do we have here?
Now, this piece was actually, something we haven't talked about yet. I love Norse mythology. The lore of the Vikings, to me, is just some of the best stories. And so I've started doing a personal series on Norse mythology. And for this particular piece, I was actually contacted by a pagan temple in the United Kingdom to do a painting for their altarpiece. They found me online. And so this depicts Frigga, the goddess of Norse mythology, Odin's wife, if you're familiar. I mean, everybody kind of knows Odin and Thor from the Marvel Comics movies. And so, yeah, it's her looking into her magic box of secrets. One of the pieces of lore on Frigg is that she knows all the secrets of the universe but tells no one.
Huh.
So
that I did not know. All right, and here we're back to the Fantasy Hero cover, so we'll just show that again real quick.
Yeah, you can get a little bigger shot of it. You can actually, I don't know if you can pick it up, in the background there's a stained glass window of a king, and the dragon has actually punched out the head of the king when he took over. I've also hidden all sorts of little things, helmets of various characters and skulls. And
interesting.
Yeah, that treasure took a long time to paint.
I bet it did.
Took a long time to paint.
That's awesome. All right. What do we have here?
So this is Odin. This is a piece I did that sort of kicked off the Norse mythology series. And this was actually the first thing I did on Kickstarter as well. And I funded the painting entirely through a Kickstarter campaign, which for artists looking for tips of how to kind of diversify, you can stick to just games and commercial work, but really the advantage of crowdfunding and getting people. And so I sold a bunch of prints through the Kickstarter, which raised more than I was actually making at the time off of my commission work to do a personal piece. So
nice.
Yeah, it was really good.
All right, so this looks like we're still with the Norse mythology here.
Yeah, this is a piece I just finished this one up. This is one of my recent pieces, and I did something different with this one where I videotaped myself as I was working on it. So on YouTube, I have the Sam Flegal YouTube channel, and you can see the process videos as I go through the process of painting it. And so this depicts the god Tyr, who sacrifices his hand to bind the great devouring wolf Fenrir to keep him from devouring the world. And it's an interesting thing. What I love about this story is it's kind of a story of contradictions, because Tyr is the god of truth and justice, and in order to trick the wolf, he has to lie to the wolf. But the wolf is also, supposedly, it's impossible to bind the wolf.
Right.
And so they have the dwarves make this cord out of a cat's footsteps and a fish's breath and a bird's spit. So all these impossible things. So the end of the story is that basically the wolf that can't be bound is bound. The hero, the god that can't tell a lie, does tell a lie.
Right.
And it's all about impossibilities. And I really get into that kind of stuff with mythology. So.
Huh. Well, there it is, folks. That's some of Sam's artwork. Sam, where can they find you and a way to either study your work or purchase it?
The best way is just to go to samflegal.com. Check me out on my website. I'm also on Facebook as Samuel Flegal, my full name, and Instagram is Samuel Flegal, but the best way for sure is through my website.
So there it is, folks. Sam Flegal telling us a little bit about how to do art in the industry, some tips and tricks, and make sure you check out his stuff. Thanks for your time, Sam. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Folks, I'm David Lowry with Club Fantasci. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Please share and like this video, and let us know what else you'd like to see on the series. Have a good day.